Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for this special announcement on Zoom and Facebook live stream. Today, Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens is joined by Councillor Fabio Costante, representing Ward 2 in Sandwich Town, Michelle Stadegard, Acting Manager of Culture and Events for the City of Windsor, James Chaco, Senior Manager of Parks for the City of Windsor, Irene Moore Davis, President of the Essex County Black Historical Research Society, TJ Travis, poet, musician, storyteller, and operator of Bloomfield House in Sandwich Town, and member of Mackenzie Hall's Friends of the Court, Alana Freeman, President of the Friends of the Court, Mary Ann Mulhern, the City of Windsor's Poet Laureate, John Elliott, Executive Director of the Sandwich Teen Action Group, and Barb Snyder and Don Wilson, who are both friends of the court. They are all joined by representatives from our local media, while everyone else is able to join us via live stream on Facebook from the safety and comfort of their home. Mayor Dilkens will provide some introductory remarks momentarily, followed by a conversation with today's panelists. We will conclude with questions from the media. A reminder that panelists must turn your microphone and camera on and off using the buttons in the bottom left corner of the screen. Panelists, please ensure that your camera is enabled for the entire session, but only turn your microphone on when speaking. Welcome media members. Please use the chat and raise hand function in Zoom to request a question. And once the conversation has wrapped up, media members will be called on to ask questions and your microphone will be enabled. Thank you for your attendance and participation today. I'll turn things over to Mayor Dilkens to start us off. Please go ahead, Your Worship.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Dana. It's certainly an honor to be here representing the City of Windsor, along with Fabio Costante, my council colleague, to make this very special announcement in connection with Black History Month. Now, each year in February, people all across Canada and the United States and other areas of the world mark the start of Black History Month. And that's a time when we celebrate and we showcase and reflect on the contributions, in our case, of Black Canadians. Throughout history and today, these men, women, families, entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, educators, activists, artists, and more have helped to create a more culturally diverse, prosperous, and storied world. In 1926, U.S. Professor Carter G. Woodson declared Negro History Week, a week in February that marked birthdays of civil rights activists Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. That laid the building blocks for the 1976 declaration by Toronto City Council that February would henceforth be known as Black History Month. In 1995, national recognition was achieved when the House of Commons unanimously passed the Honorable Jean Augustine's motion to recognize the month. Today, Black History Month is commemorated in Canada, the United States, Ireland, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. This month is about remembering our past, celebrating our present, and of course, shaping our future. People of African descent have helped to shape Canada's heritage and identity since the early 1600s, when Black loyalists came to Canada after the American Revolution and settled in the Maritimes. Black Canadian soldiers have sacrificed everything during wartime as far back as the War of 1812. This month, Windsor-Essex celebrates with a series of virtual events and initiatives aimed at highlighting Black arts, culture, heritage, in many, many innovative ways. Organizations like the Essex County Black Historical Research Society, the Windsor West Indian Association, the Amherstburg Freedom Museum, Windsor Public Library, Black Kids in Action, and more will come together to recognize the importance of Black History Month and, of course, to encourage everyone in our community to participate. These commemorations help us learn about Black Canadians whose stories should never be forgotten at a time when racial discrimination and intolerance are still alive throughout our world. Last year, the City of Windsor helped celebrate this month by unveiling our incredible Black History murals in their new Sandwich Town location in Patterson Park. These murals depict prominent Black locals like Mary and Henry, Alton Parker, and Henry Bibb. This year, I'm also proud to announce that the City of Windsor is celebrating Black History Month by renaming the parkette located beside Mackenzie Hall to help raise awareness and to show our support of unity here in one of Canada's most diverse communities. On screen today, as well with us is James Chaco, who's our Senior Manager of Parks with the City of Windsor. He's on site at the park adjacent to Mackenzie Hall in Sandwich Town. And following a request from Mackenzie Hall's Friends of the Court volunteer group, and after a recent unanimous approval by City Council, this park will forever after be called Mary E. Bibb Park. This is certainly an honor of an American-born educator and abolitionist leader who is considered to be the first female Black journalist in Canada who was involved in the anti-slavery activities and who, along with her husband, Henry, and from our very own Sandwich Town, used their paper called Voice of the Fugitive, this newspaper to help supporters of the Underground Railroad. Mary Bibb helped to shape this community, and today we are honoring her as we continue to nurture and support a strong, culturally rich, and significant Sandwich Town and broader community. And before we hear about the woman we'll be honoring, I'll invite Councillor Fabio Costante to say a few words on behalf of Ward 2 and Sandwich Town. Councillor?
Thanks, Mayor. And actually, before I get started, Mayor, I heard from a little birdie it's your birthday today. Is that true?
It may or may not be true.
Well, if it is, happy birthday, sir.
Thank you very much.
First, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Court for bringing this forward, particularly TJ Travis. I know has been a strong advocate of renaming the park. And today is a great day. Is a day that we celebrate our history and the people who've shaped it. Secondly, I'd like to thank everybody on this panel. Everyone in their own right has contributed, past, present, and future, to our collective history and to promoting our community. Some of the initiatives that we've undertaken in the last few years, like Mayor Dilkens has described, including the Black History murals that are prominently featured in Patterson Park. Last year, through the Windsor-Essex Community Benefits Committee, we approved $20,000 for the Sandwich First Baptist Church to promote its history. It was the largest funding grant on the Canadian side. And working with Irene on the panel here and city administration and others in building awareness around some of our street names, particularly those that are named after former slave owners. And so, these are some initiatives that as a city councillor, of course, I'm proud of moving forward with, but we have a long way to go still, and we have still a lot to learn and a lot to recognize with respect to our history, both good and not so good. But today is a day that we celebrate and a day that we recognize Miss Mary Bibb and all of her achievements and everything that she's done to shape Sandwich Town. And so again, I want to thank everybody on the panel here today, everyone involved, everyone who's watching, and everyone who came together to make this a reality. Sandwich Town's a wonderful place that we all love because of its history, because of its diversity, and because of the people, including those on this panel today, who helped shape it. And so again, thank you, Mayor, and I look forward to hearing from everybody else.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Costante, and you're bang on. Sandwich Town is an amazing place. And to help us understand the history and importance of Mary Bibb, her connection to Sandwich Town, Irene Moore-Davis is here. Irene is an educator, an author, and an activist who frequently speaks about equity, diversity, and African-Canadian history to a wide variety of audiences. And her forthcoming book focuses on a history of Black lives in Windsor from 1700 forward. Irene, thanks for being here.
Happy Black History Month. It's an honor to share some information about Mary Miles Bibb. Her story is astonishing, but it's important to remember that she was one of many luminaries of the anti-slavery movement and Underground Railroad movement who once walked these streets in our city. So Mary Elizabeth Miles was born to free African-American parents in Rhode Island around 1820. And her freeborn status meant that she was afforded certain privileges, such as the right to education. She studied at the Massachusetts State Normal School, which is now known as Framingham State University, and she graduated in 1843. And as an established, educated African-American woman, she had a great career teaching in schools, Boston, Albany, New York, and Cincinnati. But she could have just stopped there, but she didn't. It was through her activities in the abolitionist movement that she truly shone. And it was through that activism that she met Henry Bibb. They were married in 1848. Because even in the retelling of Black history, the stories of men are often given prominence over those of women, Henry Bibb often gets a lot of praise and recognition, while Mary remains in obscurity. Make no mistake, Henry's story was remarkable too. Henry Bibb was a formerly enslaved person, originally from Kentucky, who made his escape, was recaptured and escaped again, and became someone who gained literacy skills, who became a writer and a renowned abolitionist, and became known as a passionate speaker in the anti-slavery movement. And while he was still technically a fugitive from slavery, he had the courage to appear many places in public, telling his stories, recounting his lived experiences of slavery. And so he met Mary Miles Bibb. She had not shared those experiences, but together they were a powerful team in the abolitionist movement. And in 1849, Henry Bibb published his famous autobiography, Narrative of the Life and Adventures of Henry Bibb, an American Slave. It was his book, but it had Mary's fingerprints all over it. After the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 in the United States, it became dangerous for a lot of people to remain there. So many African Americans, both formerly enslaved people and free people of color, made the decision to move to Canada. And the Bibbs did that too. They chose to settle in Sandwich and then in Windsor, where they could enjoy the relative safety of Canada West, but still remain in close contact with their network of abolitionists and Underground Railroad operatives on the US side of the border. They came here with a sense of purpose. Like several other celebrated figures in the anti-slavery movement, they chose this place as their base of operations to keep fighting against the unjust institution of American slavery. Not long after they had settled in their home in Sandwich, they began their work in earnest. In a letter written to the philanthropist in November of 1850, just a couple of months after Henry and Mary had arrived in Sandwich, Mary wrote with a sense of urgency, "There are hundreds of slaves coming here daily. My husband and self consider this the field at present. We are about to engage in this." And engage they did in a multitude of ways. On January 1st, Henry and Mary Bibb launched a newspaper, Voice of the Fugitive. Henry officially was the publisher, but again, the paper had Mary's fingerprints all over it. Just a rudimentary examination of Mary's writing style and correspondence versus Henry's writing style against the tone and language of the newspaper will without a doubt reveal that she had a far more significant role in the paper than that for which she has traditionally been given credit. And indeed, it was Mary who was editing and publishing the newspaper whenever Henry was out of town on his tours or attending anti-slavery meetings and conventions. She observed upon arrival that Black children and adults needed access to school, so she opened one herself. By the end of 1850, she had opened a school in Sandwich where she was offering both day and evening classes. And by February of 1851, she was teaching over 40 students in the daytime classes alone. She taught without pay for over a year. Eventually, she turned the school over to community members and did something kind of interesting, focusing her attention on a dressmaking business. She advertised that she had the newest Eastern and Parisian fashions. She was a pretty multifaceted woman. In September 1852, she launched a new school, this time in Windsor. And in 1853, in a letter to the American Missionary Association, she wrote, "My pupils number 59. Many of whom walked 2 and 3 miles daily to and from school." She was trying to raise money to hire an extra teacher. But she did much more than even all of those things. She founded literary societies. She offered the mid-19th century equivalent of settlement services to newly arrived freedom seekers, helping them find clothing, food, shelter, more permanent housing, or employment. And with the support of philanthropists from both sides of the river, she and Henry devoted countless hours to the operation of the Refugee Home Society, an organization which helped formerly enslaved people to purchase their own homes and land in Essex County, for the first time profiting from their own agricultural skills. In 1854, the unthinkable happened. Henry died at age 39. But she continued teaching. She persevered and had a school with over 40 pupils, 7 of whom were white children, according to Benjamin Drew. She opened a fancy ladies' store in Windsor, ran her business in her school, and continued to be a community leader. Eventually, she remarried, this time to Isaac Carey, and continued operating her store until 1871. Upon the death of her husband, she returned to the United States and died in Brooklyn, New York in 1877. As you've seen in the Mary E. Bibb Park, there is a federal historic plaque that declares the Bibbs persons of national historic significance. That was placed there in 2005 on a day many of us remember. And she is absolutely worth all of the recognition that she is now receiving. So this Black History Month and always, let's lift up the name of Mary E. Miles Bibb.
Thank you very much, Irene. Next up, TJ Travis. He's well known to many in Windsor-Essex. He oversees the Bloomfield House Community Collective in Sandwich Town, providing safe and accessible space for outreach initiatives. He's also a poet, a writer, a musician, an activist, and a member of the Friends of the Court at Mackenzie Hall. And it was TJ who first began referring to the park as Mary Bibb Park, and who worked with the Friends of the Court to move this entire process forward. So TJ is here with us today to talk about the history of the project, but also to share some music and some of his writings on Mary Bibb and women of the Underground Railroad. Thanks for joining us, TJ.
Greetings, far and wide with an open heart and a thoughtful mind. I'd first like to acknowledge the city of Windsor for doing what is right. The truth doesn't always come when you want it, but it's always on time. And in this moment, we are setting forth on a well-traveled path toward justice, reconciliation. We must acknowledge our sins if we're to bring cleanliness to the spirit. And it's with honor and humility that I participate in today's commemoration and celebration. And I do so for all the giants that have come before me, both known and unknown. In 2016, I set out on a mission to find my people, my story, myself, my identity was lost in the decomposed pages of history. I knew where I was and I had a vague idea of how I got here, but I didn't quite know where I'd come from. The roads I traveled, the people I met, for better or for worse, and I didn't know the languages I spoke, the stories I collected. My memory was washed away like the humanity and dignity of my aunties and grandmothers, sisters and mothers, watered and smeared across the powerful nations built upon their backs. In 2016, I was prepared to liberate myself from mental slavery and trade in the illusion of freedom for truth. I began searching for my grandmothers and aunties through the stories of other people and their experiences. Moonlighting in the patchwork of a mosaic quilt, I was participating in the rebirth of a collective story, a human story, a universal story that tied all of us together. And I identified one common thread present throughout the poetry of the past: the invisibility of women, particularly Black and Indigenous women. Our telling of history is so systemically broken that sadly, I had to narrow the efforts of my project to one person I could center the project around. In honor of all the grandmothers, I centered my project around Mary Elizabeth Miles Bibb, transforming my initiative into searching for Mary Bibb. Now, Mary Bibb has enough historical notoriety to pop up in a Wikipedia search, but there's not enough information to place her in the context of mainstream Black historic narrative. And if Mary Bibb fell between the cracks, then what about Grandma Lucinda Travis, who traveled across Turtle Island, fleeing her home following the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, making her home with her family upon the colonized lands of traditional Indigenous territories? Thanks to the research of Dr. Afua Cooper, I was able to piece Mary Bibb together, hold her story in my skin, and honor those forgotten through her. As an act of grassroots organizing, we unofficially renamed Mackenzie Park Mary Bibb Park. It was important that her name alone, separate from her husband, be honored. We honor Grandma Bibb in the name of every invisible woman lost in the clouds of time, for every unsung hero that had her name swallowed by the beast of patriarchy. Selfishly, for every bit of my story that had been stolen from me, Mary Bibb needed space. And now, as we stand here on this great day, February 2nd, 2021, after we've collectively pushed for so long, we celebrate the joy of correcting what has been wrong for a long time. I'll conclude my comments with a short poem from my Missing from History collection. This piece is titled Mary Miles Bibb. She whispered a gentle peace to soothe his savage skin. Trauma beneath his feet, he walked to the end of time. Her puzzle pieces scattered shimmering stars, stalking the shadow they could not devour. She could not be swallowed, not by time, not by blood or hate. She twisted herself into dust, giving her ashes to the sky. I'd like to thank everybody for participating in this very important day. I'm very happy that I could be here with everybody. Well done on the renaming of this park. This is very important, and I think it's going to blaze a path. I'm hoping that we can gather together soon where we can rename another park. You know, maybe in the near future we'll see John Elliott Park. You know, so let's plant those seeds. Peace.
Thanks very much, TJ. Thank you very much for your strong advocacy on this initiative and for being here with us today, and your continuous dedication to Sandwich Town and to Windsor's arts, culture, and heritage scene. Of course, TJ worked to make this happen alongside the Friends of the Court at Mackenzie Hall, which is an historic gem in our community. And originally a courthouse and jail built by Canada's second Prime Minister, Alexander Mackenzie, Mackenzie Hall is now a cultural center for Sandwich Town and the city of Windsor, with performing arts space, gallery space, meeting rooms, a ballroom, and the adjacent Mary E. Bibb Park with a gazebo, intimate amphitheater, and tiered bench seating. And the Friends of the Court is certainly a dedicated volunteer group that first formed to save the historic hall from deterioration and vacancy. Their fundraising efforts, combined with substantial municipal investments, saw the building reopen to the public in 1985 as a premier arts, culture, and heritage hub for Sandwich. They've assisted the city with a successful renovation and restoration of the hall, and since their inception in 1981, the group has provided a list of donations amounting to approximately $1 million, which has been used towards upgrades and other initiatives at Mackenzie Hall. They've made a significant difference in the lives of many in Windsor-Essex, and I'm certainly pleased this morning to welcome Alana Freeman, Barb Snyder, and Don Wilson today to speak on behalf of the group. Welcome to all three.
Thank you, Mayor Dilkens. And I guess what the Friends wanted to do was provide a little more history. Mayor Dilkens provided some of the history about the Friends of the Court, and let me give you a little more information. So in the 1970s, the Essex County Courthouse had become empty as justices moved to larger quarters and was in danger of destruction. It had been built in 1855 with the stonemason being Alexander Mackenzie, who went on to become Canada's second Prime Minister. Evelyn McLean, an advocate for historic buildings, prevailed at City Hall meetings to prevent its destruction. Eventually, the mayor and city council of the time agreed to buy the courthouse from the province of Ontario for $1 and handed over the responsibility for its restoration to Evelyn and her Friends of the Court in 1981. Grants were assessed and other funds raised, as Mayor Dilkens mentioned, and the resulting Arts and Culture Center was named Mackenzie Hall, still maintained by the City of Windsor with input and support from the Friends of the Court. Beside the courthouse in 1981 was a laundry named Wishy Washy Laundry, operating in a former hotel. That laundry burned down to the ground in 1985. The land was available for sale and was purchased by the city and the Friends of the Court. In the hands of the Parks Department, it became the lovely parkette that it is today, an adjunct to the activities at the hall and enjoyed by the residents of Sandwich. Now we're so happy to present the fact that this park now has an official name, the Mary E. Bibb Park, honoring that influential Black pioneer in Sandwich. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'd just like to add that we've been working with the municipality over a number of programs throughout the year. The Friends of the Court does work throughout the year to ensure that Mackenzie Hall remains a vibrant cultural center. We assist in the promotion of programs, stage annual fundraising drives, with those proceeds from our charitable status being used to invest in the enhancement of the building and its parks. The city has worked together with us, St. Clair College, on a number of partnerships. Most recent that we've done is the 2020 Community Organization Investment Application with the Gordie Howe International Bridge. And that helps to improve the Mary Bibb Park as well as the grounds of Mackenzie Hall. We work together with the municipality as their advisory body on matters concerning Mackenzie Hall, and we hope to continue with this these ventures throughout history. And again, I'd like to make mention, it's very important, the number of heritage sites in the town of Sandwich, in particular Mackenzie Hall, and as Irene noted, this has federal designation of the Mary and Henry Bibb. And it's very important as part of our culture to certainly understand and celebrate these past history people. Thank you.
Barb, did you want to join in?
I'll just add this. The other two have covered Friends of the Court with the City of Windsor very well. But one of our programs also is to employ a student from St. Clair College in agriculture, in horticulture. And the Mary Bibb Park will be well taken care of by this initiative with the city and Friends of the Court to maintain the park. Thank you.
Well, Alana, Barb, Dunn, thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity on behalf of my council colleagues in the city to say thank you for all you've done and everything that the Friends of the Court, the entire team continues to do, for the work you've done all through the years to preserve and showcase Mackenzie Hall and other important artifacts and infrastructure and gems that we have in Sandwich Town. Thank you for the programs and initiatives that you deliver each year, for the fundraising efforts, for the commitment to the hall and the grounds there. And we certainly know that Windsor's story is tied to the history of Sandwich Town and to our local Black history, and the renaming of this park and Mackenzie Hall itself are a big part of that history. Michelle Stadigard, you're on the line with us today. You're representing culture and events for the City of Windsor, and I just wanted to ask you to speak briefly about the important role of storytelling and naming in municipalities.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Mayor Dilkens. A community's identity is definitely connected to a physical building and structures across the city, but it's also about our intangible resources and our community stories. We often say that local stories are the DNA of culture. They help us create a true sense of place and forge strong relationships across our communities. We see these stories in monuments and memorials, on plaques, and the public art displayed in Windsor. You see these stories in our neighborhoods and in our parks. Recognizing Mary Bibb with the renaming of Mackenzie Hall Park really ties together so many strands that tell the story of Sandwich Town. Storytelling and naming in municipalities gives us a real chance to celebrate inclusivity, showcase diversity, and most importantly, preserve and share stories about the people who came before us and really charted the course in creating a Windsor that would become known as a haven for those seeking a life of freedom and opportunity. As you said, we live in one of Canada's most diverse communities, and that's in large part because of the work of community leaders and giants like Mary Bibb. It's a privilege to work on this type of project with dedicated community partners like the Friends of the Court, and I'm really pleased to be celebrating this today. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Michelle. Appreciate you being here today. John Elliott, I'm glad you were able to join us as well today. He's the Executive Director for the Sandwich Teen Action Group, or STAG as it's known. And STAG is a community-based nonprofit organization responding to the needs of youth in Windsor-Essex. STAG is committed to providing programs for positive life experiences that enable youth at risk to find support, cope with problems, and lead healthy lives. And I really wanted to ask you, John, what this kind of, seemingly simple action, the renaming of a park area in Sandwich, means to the community. What's it like, for example, for the youth that you work with at STAG to walk down the street and have access to a public space named for a prominent Black woman who had such an impact on our community, on Canada, and even on the US?
John, I'll just
Well, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
When I got the question, I thought, geez, how am I going to talk for the youth? So I took a little bit of liberty to send the question out to some of the youth that I'm currently working with. There's actually two of the youth. I want to read their answer. They're working on a Ontario Trillium Foundation anti-racism grant. So I sent the question out to them, and I wanted to get what they thought about it rather than me try to kind of go inside their heads to see what they would say. So the first student, I'll just call them by their name, and her name is LaDonia. She's a grade 9 student, and she had this to say: renaming the park would be exhilarating, empowering, and would create start significance to the role that the Black community has contributed to community and national development. Renaming the park after a person who myself, as a person of color, has looked up to gives me a sense of hope, knowing that minorities are finally being given recognition for what they have done. It comes to show that people of any descent, no matter their race, are inspired to do greatness. This simple action symbolizes change and acceptance in our community, giving youth in the community a chance to feel safe and accepted. The second student was Tayshawn, another one of the students working on the anti-racism grant. He's a grade 10 student. He said, being able to walk down the street and have access to a public space named for a prominent Black woman who had such an impact on our community shows the sense of recognition. Having a public space named for a prominent Black woman shows that someone that has done great things gets recognition publicly for what they did. And the last student was a student that grew up at STAG, is currently a University of Windsor student, Justice. said, I believe the renaming of the park would be a great idea for Black youth living in the West End area and would have something to look up to. Working with the youth, I could see many feeling empowered and represented by the name change of the park. They can look at this change as an important piece of their identity and who left a mark on the community before them. I strongly agree with the name change. So that was some students, and just my own few comments. I actually am a descendant of the Underground Railroad, the John Freeman Walls Museum in Puce, Ontario. That's my grandmother side of the family. So, kind of what TJ said, knowing where you come from to know where you're going is very important. And I've always known the history of the family. I try and share that as much as I can because it's important. And I think, today's a day where we're recognizing Mary Bibb Park just to tell the story of what truly happened. We tell the story, but we leave out important pieces in the overall story, this being a Black woman and her husband that contributed very significantly. That story needs to be told over and over. And as the students said in their answers, it's like footprints when they're walking through their lives to assist with their journey sometimes, right? Just knowing that there was somebody of color that played a role and they can do the same. So a great day today. Thank you, TJ. Thank you, Councillor Costante, friends of the court, everyone that's had involvement, the mayor, the city. Another, great day for Sandwich-Town. What could I say? Thank you.
Thanks very much, John, and thank you for gathering the feedback there from the folks that you spoke to, and thanks for all the work that you do at STAG to help assist and make lives better for people in Sandwich-Town and the west side of the city. It's greatly appreciated. Our last panelist today is Windsor's Poet Laureate Mary Ann Mulhern, who is here to share 2 poems written reflecting on the Underground Railroad and on Mary Bibb. And our Poet Laureate team frequently uses poetry to respond to key moments happening in the community. And Mary Ann was very eager to be part of this day. Mary Ann, thank you very much for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Dilkens. I'm just delighted to be here. Absolutely delighted. And I was so impressed with the whole story of Mary E. Bibb. Several years ago, I really became fascinated with the whole Underground Railroad. And I wrote the poem, Freedom's Rail. When her people asked, who will lead us through forests, where teeth and bullets tear flesh from bone, across a river pulling us into nets cast for bounty? Harriet Tubman answered, like Moses before me, I will find a path, lead you north on black winter nights, search for manna in the snow, bring you over on hidden lines running to Canada's sanctuary, where men are not linked with chains, where women wear rings on hands without ropes, where children play in cotton washed clean of blood, and the fields you plant yield harvests of promise, Africa's flower opening. I was delighted in reading about Mary E. Bibb that she was an educator. I also am an educator. Pathways, stars. Mary Bibb, a young Black teacher, taught children of her race here in Windsor. She pointed to the heavens, invited Black children to reach for the stars in a time when Black children were kept away from books, gateways to the universe of learning. All the magic of words written on doors, Mary Bibb opened to them, their brothers and sisters, their children. Thank you very much.
Mary Ann, thank you for sharing those 2 poignant pieces, very fitting, and appreciate the work that you and the entire Poet Laureate team do for the city of Windsor. And I want to thank each of the panelists today for sharing your words and your work and your excitement for this announcement. And there's no doubt, Windsor has had a long history as a place of refuge for those seeking a better life. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, it's life's most persistent and urgent question. The question is, what are you doing for others? Mary Bibb certainly changed lives, and I'm thankful to TJ and the Friends of the Court for asking council to name this park after her, and to City Council for readily and unanimously agreeing to that naming. Thank you to everyone commemorating Black History Month this year in Windsor-Essex, and to all those working behind the scenes to coordinate those virtual celebrations. What you're doing makes a big difference for us all, and thank you for staying safe and doing your part to keep the community safe at this very difficult time. And with that, I'll turn it back to Dana for questions from the media. Dana?
Thanks, Mayor Dilkens. Members of the media at this time, please use the Zoom raise hand function to indicate if you'd like to pose a question to any member of the panel. We're going to begin with Rob Hindi, BAME 800. Rob, go ahead, enable your microphone, please.
Dana, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. My question's for TJ. TJ, how long have you and the Friends been working on this for?
Hi, Rob. I brought the idea to the table along with Mary Ellen Scully maybe a year and a half ago. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it's the process went through pretty quick when we brought it to the table to push it forward. It's something that the community had been working on since 2016, and as I mentioned, we had unofficially named the park Mary Bibb Park without much intention in going through the official procedures, to have it officially named. But when the idea came to the Friends of the Court, it moved pretty quick from that point. And I'd say it was maybe a year and a half ago, but maybe some of my colleagues on that board could fill that in.
Follow up?
Yes, I guess just to have the park name Mary E. Bibb, excuse me. For people that don't know, I guess, the history of Mary and the Bibb family, are you hoping when they see the parkette, the sign in the parkette, that they do some research or they ask questions? Are you hoping that more people look into this? I'm not sure who this question's for, whoever wants to take it.
I'll jump in once again. I'd like to also state that there is a plaque there that speaks about Mary Bibb and her husband Henry Bibb. So when you arrive at the park, there is a bit of information. Hopefully that's enough information to inspire you to do more looking. But what we have in Sandwichtown is we have a beautiful interactive museum in Sandwichtown. And what's happening right now is that historical spaces that are being named after historic people are starting to create a real energy of like travel and tourism and information. So my hope with the park being named Mary Bibb, and with that information that's provided, is just going to inspire people to take a walk down the road to look at the murals that are down there and everything that comes up in the interim.
Thanks very much, Rob. The next question comes from Adele Loisel at Blackburn. Adele, go ahead.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me. And can you?
Loud and clear.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I'll figure this out one day. This is a question for Fabio. I guess you mentioned renaming streets that now have the names of slave owners attached to them, and also about possibly naming some other parks after Black historical figures. How is that coming?
Thanks, Adele. And that was an initiative that was started by Irene Moore Davis. And so I put a council question forward last year, not necessarily to rename the streets. The initiative was to build awareness and education surrounding the streets that are named after former slave owners. And so administration is working with, and perhaps Irene can chime in as well if she'd like to, but administration is working with some folks in the community and our diversity committee in moving that along. I suspect at some point in the near future, hopefully sooner than later, we'll get a report that'll come to council to look at opportunities to, again, build awareness and education perhaps in the form of a plaque or some placard to recognize the history, the total history of the folks that some of these streets are named after. So that's the process as I know it so far. But again, if Irene would like to chime in, I'd be happy to hear from her as well.
Yeah, I've been really thrilled with the progress that city administration has been making on that issue. There are some wonderful things that can be done technologically speaking to raise awareness around street names without actually changing the street names. It's not that we necessarily want to bury the past, but it's important that people do have a sense, not only of the fact that there were slave owning families after whom we have things named in this town, but that there was this whole group of enslaved people who were so critical to the establishment of this settlement and whose endeavors are not generally given any focus or emphasis. So we want to right that historical wrong in terms of their being obscured in the narrative of how this city town came to be. And one of the things that's been suggested, looking at models from other cities and places, is to establish a system of street name signs that have QR codes attached so that people can scan them and get the information using spaces in the major intersections where those streets occur so that people can get some additional information on a historical sign. And certainly working with our local school boards and museums and other entities to make sure that there's a greater awareness around our more complicated and comprehensive history.
And it certainly is a complicated history, and one that until very recently, many Canadians were simply ignorant of. I guess, how important is it that all Canadians understand the full picture of our history? And I guess in this case, as it pertains to Black history.
I mean, we can answer that question any number of ways, but briefly, what I would say is Canada, I think, as Ronaldo Walcott has said, is often viewed as a white space devoid of Black presence. And we do need to right that historical wrong and make sure that the full narrative is understood, that people of African descent have actually been in this country since the 17th century. And right here in this region, in what's now our city, since the 18th century, that they played pivotal roles in building this community, that the families that we think of as the founders did a lot of good things, but couldn't have accomplished all that they did without the labor of these individuals whose names are not known and recognized. And that we really do need to put a focus on a more complete history, understanding that people of every era are complicated and flawed, as we are complicated and flawed in our era. But when we lift up only the names of the enslaving families or the colonizing families or the oppressive families, and we don't honor the individuals who are working alongside them, whether under duress or otherwise, don't lift up the workers, don't lift up the women, the racialized people, the indigenous people, we do ourselves a disservice in terms of understanding how this community came to be, and in terms of understanding what our present day situations look like, how they came to evolve into the Canada we now know, and what we need to do to perhaps address those historical structures of oppression.
Great, thank you, Adele. We go back to Rob Hindi. Rob, go ahead.
Sorry, one more quick question for TJ. TJ, just in general, I know you mentioned more is going to be done. You're looking at renaming other parks and other facilities in the city, but overall, I know this year is different with the pandemic, but are you pleased with how the region, how the city, the county is celebrating Black History Month?
I'm always pleased that there's a celebration of Black History Month. I'm overwhelmed with joy and happiness when we are celebrating Black history throughout the year, you know, as human history, and not living, not isolated in a silo, you know. So I was thrilled to see the organization that went into making sure we had a Black History kickoff at the end of January. That despite the hurdles that the pandemic is throwing at us, that we can still gather in these virtual spaces. I'd like to believe that, you know, people coming together like we are right now and reaching out to the community is going to start conversations inside people's homes. We're here gathered because we renamed a park, but as what was mentioned earlier, is we are also introducing stories to the general public that are very important in the context of our collective existence on these lands. You know, so I'm excited for Black History Month. I'm always excited. I'm glad that people are organizing despite the difficulties, despite the constant tragedy that we are often overwhelmed with. You know, we can still celebrate and commemorate. So yeah, I'm quite excited.
And then one more for the Mayor Dilkens. Mayor, I know a number of items come to the table, some harder than others to get council to, I guess, vote on unanimously. I'm guessing this one was, this is just remarkable. This is what the city has done here. I'm guessing this was a very easy decision for the city to rename this park.
I think these decisions are always made in camera. I think this, from the start of its introduction until it was approved, might have taken 30 seconds. It was a no-brainer. All of the material had been provided by city administration to support the decision, the history on Mary Bibb and why, and the connection to Sandwich Town. It was very, very easy to have this approved, and we were delighted to do it unanimously.
Thank you, media members. Any other questions? All right, that looks like it's it for our question and answer period. I want to thank you, Your Worship, panelists, members of the media for joining us today. Directly following this meeting, a recording of this webinar will be available on the City of Windsor's Facebook page for anyone who was not able to tune in live today. Thank you, everyone, and please stay safe.
Have a great week.